welcome to this session on cybersecurity and digitalization in the oil and gas sector. My name is Moura. I am the head of industry solutions for the Center for Cybersecurity at the World Economic Forum. I'm delighted to be here today and moderate this session, and I think we're going to have a very inspired conversation, which is once again informed by the urgency of climate change and cyber attacks on critical infrastructure sectors such as oil and gas. According to the latest World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report released this week, among the highest likelihood risks of the next 10 years are extreme weather, climate action failure, and human-led environmental damage, as well as digital inequality and cybersecurity failure. But first, it is a great pleasure to me to introduce General Wesley Clark, who is going to talk about the urgency to address cybersecurity threats targeting critical infrastructure sectors. General Clark serves as the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Wesley Clark and Associate, and is a retired four-star general after 38 years in the United States Army, having served in his last assignment as the commander of the US Southern Command, and then as the commander of the US European Command. General Clark, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Georges. So in late December of 2020, much of the business and security world was rocked by news of a massive, believed to be Russian cyber hack. 4,000 businesses, most US government agencies. It was international, not just against the United States. It turned out that a company called SolarWinds had permitted an intrusion into its network management software suite called Orion. There was an update to Orion, and somehow it had been tampered with, infected with malware, which enabled an outside agency to use the software for at least for massive surveillance of the networks that were covered by Orion. And how did they get in? Apparently, it was a compromise of a password, a very complicated password called SolarWinds 123. Now, how did we come to this? And what does it portend for the oil and gas sector and industry in general? So we've got to go back 100 years to an Italian strict military theorist named Giulio Douhet, because after World War I, strategists were trying to avoid the terrible stalemate of trench warfare. And Douhet envisioned clouds of bombers over enemy cities. In World War II, the US Air Force attempted to destroy Germany's industrial capacity by strategic bombing. Tens of thousands of casualties on both sides, terrible civilian casualties, but largely it failed. So in the aftermath, the Geneva Conventions proclaimed that attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure with the intent of using public pain to coerce governments were illegal. Three factors, however, brought us to where we are today. First, looking at the failure of strategic bombing, strategists began to discuss network analysis. What were the key points of vulnerability in networks that could disable an adversary's industrial potential, military industrial potential? Second, two Chinese colonels in 1999 published a strategy booklet calling for unrestricted warfare. That is, all civilian sectors were fair game, everything from water and sewage to power and, of course, the oil and gas industry. And third, during the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we developed computers, microprocessors, and the internet that made possible not only more efficient business activities, they increased management control, reducing labor costs, but made the remote control of machinery and whole industrial processes possible through so-called SCADA systems. And this in turn led to cybercrime. First, it was those unruly Ukrainians who were trying to steal money from your bank account. And then there was interference with businesses, disrupting functions like accounting and billing. And then going after the Iranian centrifuges, a program called Stuxnet, which showed that actually you could cause kinetic damage through cyber. And this opened the door to a whole new level of cyber threat. Hard kills on key system components were possible, and then into ransomware, locking down whole blocks of data and communications systems. So that's the nature of the threat to critical infrastructure today. The Russians demonstrated it in 2015 by shutting down Ukraine's electricity supply. And that was partially mitigated by the fact that the Ukrainian electricity supply wasn't totally on SCADA. But in 2017, a series of efforts against Saudi infrastructure began. And by August, there was an effort to blow up a Saudi petrochemical plant. What does it mean for us? It means that virus shields and firewalls, passive protection aren't enough. Networks must be actively monitored, intruders driven out. Secondly, that malware can come in from components like Schneider Electric's Triconex controllers that were used in the Saudi plant. Third, human factors are always critical. So personal reliability programs, network administration, and checking things like password control are critical. And finally, broad executive understanding and attention is required. Gentlemen, let's go into the details on oil and gas. Thank you.
Thank you, General Clark, for these insightful remarks. We will now transition to a panel discussion on the main two topics of this session. First, the risk and opportunities of digitalization and energy transition strategies on the resilience of energy systems. And second, the trends in cyber threats and attacks putting pressure on existing and future energy and critical infrastructure. The fourth industrial revolution and the UN Sustainable Development Goals are opening up the energy market to more digital and green energy businesses, which raises the question on their digital readiness, cyber resilience, and trust across the ecosystem. Moreover, industrial digitalization is exposing enterprises to new risks and threats, significantly altering the cybersecurity threat landscape. This development is forcing business leaders to make some important decisions about what to prioritize. How is one risk more important than another? And are we managing the right risks? As at least engage with this discussion, please ask your question using the mobile app Q&A function. But now let me introduce this wonderful panel. First, Dr. Reem Al-Shammari, Chief Information Security Officer at the Kuwait Oil Company. Mr. Thorbjörn Force, Executive Vice President of Industrial Applications at Siemens Energy. Mr. John Markus Lervik, Co-founder and Chief Executive Officer at Cognite. And last but not least, Mr. Dario Pagani, Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Eni. So we will first start those questions on macro trends. And this first question would be for Thorbjörn. Could you share with us what are the major supply and demand forces shaping the transformation of the oil and gas sector?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and a pleasure to be among such a experienced team on this panel. So looking forward to the next few minutes of dialogue here. Well, for me, there are at least three very clear and well known to most of us trends. So one, the ever-increasing demand for energy. So both we see that a few 100 million people are without electricity, have an ambition to get there, to build infrastructure and meet the needs of a population. But also in many parts of the world where we have plenty of energy, we're still consuming more and more. So I think that's one of the trends that we need to manage moving forward. And we have seen that for many years, of course. The other trend that is building momentum and have built momentum over the last few years is of course, the public opinion in regard to climate change. And in that respect, then in our industry, very much related to decarbonization. And the third one is, I would call it the technological breakthroughs that we see both in society with hybrid electrical cars affecting our industry, but also in our industries, producing energy in a more efficient way, monitoring assets in a more efficient way, and with a higher level of security than we ever seen before. So I think these three trends of technological development, the energy demand, and the climate change creates a landscape of uncertainty. So for us, it's very much around navigating uncertainty. And that drives us to focus on on cost efficiency, drives us to focus on resilience and security of supply and our assets. And it drives us also, of course, to ensure that we have the best people around us. So talent development and talent retention is more important than ever.
Thank you, Thorbjörn. John, would you like to add anything in addition to what Thorbjörn mentioned?
No, of course. I think important thing that is happening, of course, is the shift in the energy mix as well, from pure carbon based into more green and neutral in energy. So not just hydropower, but solar and wind. That's also changing a lot. Also the dynamics of the market, obviously, and this drives obviously up quite a bit the renewables power production, which partly serves the increased demand for for energy. But there's also a clear demand for for the oil and gas industry to reduce its emissions as well. So you need both the oil and gas industry itself to be more effective in itself, and of course also to transition into new energies. And E&I, for example, are of course a big driver for that in what they are doing.
Thank you, John. Reem, being the cybersecurity expert in this panel, could you share with us, what are the cybersecurity challenges that the industry is to face as a result of the digitalization strategies which are transforming rapidly the attack surface of this industry?
Thank you so much, George. Actually, to cater the rapid change of digital transformation, which has been encountered a very, let's say, challenging times during the pandemic, where the digital transformation plans were expedited. That was planned for 5 years, were executed or implemented within 5 months. This brought us as cybersecurity professionals and entities into catering and enabling these business requirements in a very difficult times, especially when it comes to the oil sector and the market prices, where we'll all be exposing our best efforts to cope up with these challenges, with the whole world being changes, and of course expediting our perimeters of the security, not only around our companies, is now being expanded to the employees working at home. So it's no longer the investment of our building our cybersecurity defenses around our companies. It's actually building it toward the security of our employees who are working remotely. Raising the awareness is now even more important than ever. We're building huge investment into those awareness programs, because as our strategy is being changed toward this digital transformation adoption, the emerging threats are increasing rapidly. They are aware of this expansion of the premises of all companies with working remotely. They are aware of the vulnerabilities that have come recently with this adoption of the new norm, because I believe it will never go back to the normal situations before. I believe we are adopting to the new norm, and we'll be equipped with that. So our role as cybersecurity is really now became, in addition to be the cyber defenders of our entities, we are now becoming the business enablers. So we have started building our partnership with the business. We have become the partners, and not only enablers, but the partners in understanding the business. We are shifting their mindset from security being at the back seat. Actually, we are now becoming at the driver's seat. Security is being now injected at the stage 0, as we say it, and being weaved into the technology fabric of this digital transformation, where we're no longer being seen as a tool or a service. We are being enabler, and having these involvement at the early stages of any project or a digital adoption will always enable the technology to be embedded and implemented in a proper and secure manner. So all of this is happening in the current world, and I believe our leadership in the Kuwait oil sector and the KOC Kuwait Oil Company has become aware of these challenges, and they have been, let's say, involving security and information security at the early stages. Again, involving the huge investment of awareness programs, and again promoting the partnership between us and between the business. So with these challenges. We always believe, don't focus on the challenges, look at the opportunities that is always residing and coming along with the challenges, and take best of these opportunities. And this is what our leadership has done. They have taken these opportunities and building the partnership, raising the awareness, and again, injecting security at the stage 0.
Thank you, Reem. So I now would like to move to the technology topic. And Dario, this first question will be for you. As digitalization is driving growth and innovation in the oil and gas sector, and has tremendous potential to deliver shareholder, customer, and environmental value, could you share with us some of the latest technological innovations driving the transformation of your organization and the sector as a whole?
Okay, I think that there is a lot of aspects that talking about let me say technology innovation. I think that in our session, in our sector that is to transform in energy transition, I want just to focus into main area. One is data, that is a very important asset. Another thing that now is artificial intelligence. I try to explain better in detail what I mean. In terms of data, of course, we have a long story about starting from the oil and gas for the exploration part that can let me say, start a lot of years ago in terms to analyze and to produce for the numerical simulation a lot of model. Now I think that we have the capability very easily to reach on the market or on your premises that is a supercomputer, high performance computing. I think that we have to take into consideration that hardware, let me say hardware, software, but mainly the competencies to put together can give a very opportunity in terms to support the transition, in terms to reduce risk, and also to evaluate at the beginning, just in the R&D phases, what will happen, let me say, when we will enter in production. Of course, the challenge is for the evolution of energy, this kind of transition. We are using now this approach mainly with the new energy, like, let me say, the magnetic fusion, in terms to simulate what will happen when we will have this kind of capabilities, or the marine energy, or the other side that what say before in terms of emission, how to manage the carbon capture and storage for the CO2. This is, let me say, data. That means a lot of, in terms of sensor, how to capture the data, how to catch the data, and how to manage, and what kind of competencies we need to have inside the company, or with, let me say, an openness in terms of ecosystem to collaborate with different partners. Data and artificial intelligence are changing completely and supporting this challenge in terms of energy transition.
Dario, if I may ask a follow-up question, as we were speaking about resilience of the energy systems, are those new technologies contributing to greater resilience of energy systems, in the future?
I think yes, because you know that you are predict a lot of, and we are investing in terms of become more robust in terms of infrastructure. You know that one of, let me say, the weakness point in terms of resilience are the infrastructure in terms of the overall system. This means that if you can design at the beginning a very robust infrastructure that can anticipate the fault, and I think that we enter in the next step about the cyber threat, that is the other very big, strong risk. I think that it can be more robust, the resilience in terms of global infrastructure, them to manage all the information in the real time.
Thank you. Thorbjörn, given that Siemens Energy is a major supplier of industrial control systems in the oil and gas sector, could you also share your views on those questions?
Absolutely. I think, first of all, I would just like to echo what Dario was just referring to. It's coming back very much to data, and I can agree with Dario's view here very much. I think the complexity of having both old assets, medium new assets, and really new assets where everything is already equipped and ready to go. I think that challenge and complexity is for us in the industry to resolve. So I think that's one of the key components moving forward. Many of the assets, when we talk, for example, about oil and gas industry, have been out there for an extended period and have been upgraded and refined and retrofitted over time. But there are opportunities to make sure that we connect that with a new world, so to speak. I think the decarbonization story that we are looking at is basically coming out of 3 dimensions. So it's an efficiency topic where we use data, as Dario was referring to ensure that we're operating assets at its optimum point. And many assets are not there yet, or not there any longer. They were designed for a certain environment and in a certain context, and that have changed over time. So to ensure that we do the best out of existing assets. So that's one, we call that the efficiency roadmap. The second part is to hybridization, so a partial step into new fuels, into new opportunities to operate assets, and that can be to use more of the heat and its battery integrations into the overall systems, and really make use of the entire energy system. Here also we include our activities around hydrogen and blue and green hydrogen. And then of course we are very active in deep carbonization, and as Jan was alluding to earlier, very much related to renewables, for example, wind power through our partnership and equity holding in Siemens, and then of course our electrolyzer activities and grid stability activities and so on. So I think there are many different components here, and some of them are kind of more complex than others, of course. But coming back to my original topic of managing an infrastructure which includes the latest technology, but also technology from back dated to the 50s and earlier. And I think that's important for us as industry peers to manage.
Thank you, Thorbjörn. I now would like to move to the topic of resilience. Within the World Economic Forum, we have an initiative looking at cyber resilience in the oil and gas industry. Siemens Energy, Cognite, Eni, and Kuwait, all companies are key contributors in this initiative, and we'll be releasing next month a set of boardroom principles to support the oil and gas sector in their efforts to enhance cyber resilience of both the organizations and the broader ecosystem. One of those principles reflected the concept that cyber resilience is not solely an IT issue, but it is a business challenge that affects all aspects of the organization and ecosystem. John, I would like to ask you first, could you tell us how cyber resilience has been embedded in the operating model of Cognite, given that you're a software company?
Yeah, sure. Of course, I think it's very important that what has been pointed out, that this is not just about security or cybersecurity. It's about the totality and the reliability of the systems. And I think also, as Dario said, data is at the key, is really the key fuel for this industrial digital transformation. So we need to start with the whole, let's say, data journey, going from IoTs, sensors, equipment, and towards where decisions are being made. Whether with if that's happening with people making better decisions through having information and data available, or if data is being used also in through optimizations or even automation of industry. So when we think about resilience, it goes obviously from more of the cybersecurity parts. Is also related to data governance. Can you trust the data? Can you trust the quality of the data? Can you trust the integrity of the data? And also, as has been touched upon, when it comes back to people as well, you need to take the people aspect as well into account, so that you can both then through technology and through human decisions anticipate what's coming. You need to be able to tolerate disturbance. You need to be able to recover from issues, because issues will happen, and then of course you need to learn from that and improve.
Thank you, John. I think your point is very important, because when we speak about cyber resilience, it's really about an organization's ability to withstand and recover from cyber events. And we need to look at it, holistically, not just from a cybersecurity aspect. And I would like now to pivot maybe to the ecosystem dimension. One of the principles that we're covering in our in our boardroom set of principles also look at the fact that it is no longer enough to protect your house. You need to contribute to making your neighborhood safe and more resilient, especially in an industry that is becoming increasingly interconnected and interdependent, like the oil and gas sector. If we refer to the recent cyber incident uncovered last month, which compromised an IT software update and infiltrated government and critical infrastructure entities, I think it stressed the urgency for critical infrastructure organizations to adapt quickly to the pace of change in this fast-moving threat landscape. So Thorbjörn, I would like to maybe ask you first about what your views are in the need for building greater resilience across the ecosystem and mitigating the impact of those events. What do we need to do more of within the industry?
Well, first of all, I agree with the complexity around it, and of course, with the heritage coming out of IT industry and PC industry and so on, and then into OT and now a wider ecosystem, we see a need of collaborating more. We see a need of reaching out and collaborating more, building trusts across the industry, and trust, of course, being built on open, transparent dialogues. And the governance model that John was referring to as well, to ensure that data is not only captured, but we're actually talking about the accurate data and qualified data. So I think those are key components. And we launched in Siemens some years ago an initiative we call the Charter of Trust, which is really about creating a foundation of trust among peers in the industry. And together then work towards protection and prevention of data for individuals, companies, and infrastructure. And I think that's one very key enabler for us to build on what we have around us and ensure that we are connecting the dots.
Thank you, Thorbjörn. Reem, as an active member of this oil and gas community with the World Economic Forum, could you tell us, your perspective as a cybersecurity leader on what needs to happen more within the industry to build greater cyber resilience?
I will add up to my colleagues here and their valuable additions that yes, it is about collaboration. It's about sharing the knowledge and the best practices. Being part of the World Economic Forum initiative about the cyber resilience program and having different even arms that we're building together, it's a true evidence and a live evidence where us as different cybersecurity professionals coming from private and public sectors in the oil and gas industry and actually sharing our challenges, where we find many common challenges as we speak the same language of cybersecurity and a very if we can say, a highly targeted industry. We know that after the financial sector, oil and gas are the second targeted industry in the world. And again, with the digital transformation and the pressure of our economy when it comes to oil and gas, we're forced into adopting more digitalization technologies when it comes to AI, as has been mentioned, the automation, the robotics. The threat actors actually are utilizing these emerging technologies. They're making best to utilize these technologies to overcome the, let's say, systems and defense lines. But what we're doing currently is building that resilience on different layers. When it comes to technology, we are again adopting these trending technologies when it comes to AI, automation, and building the counterintelligence. It's not only about sharing the cybersecurity threat intelligence between us as forums. It's about utilizing the AI and automation and closing the gap of, as we all know, the shortage of our human factor and the resources of our employees when it comes to InfoSec community. Again, we built the resilience, and as you have mentioned, George, that it's not about really utilizing the efficiency of the systems or defense lines. Is actually how reactive and how agile a company can continue its operations after that attack. It's not about a matter of will I be attacked. It's about a matter of how agile and how quick I can recover, I can control and determine the damage and carry on my operations. This is where agility and resilience really comes into place. And today, cybersecurity resilience capabilities is being built because we need it more than ever with the agile and with the digital transformation. It's a must, a capability that needs to be set and built on different layers, whether it was, as I said, from the counterintelligence, whether it was from the threat sharing, where we need to collaborate more, or whether it was from our users themselves. There's a resilience in our first line of defense. Our employees, we need to bring their awareness and make our companies and our environments, our organization, a cyber-aware culture. This is one of the capabilities and requirements of being a resilient company, that you have a cyber-aware culture where your employees will be your strongest link rather than always seen as the weakest link.
Thank you, Reem. John, I would like to close this conversation with you, given that Cognite designs and builds industrial applications for several critical infrastructure sectors, and we've seen a rise in supply chain attacks, targeting specifically software companies. Could you tell us, how your organization is ensuring that your softwares are built and designed, with security, by default and by design?
Yeah, it's probably also one of the advantages in being a relatively younger company, that we could really start from cybersecurity and security best practices. But I think in addition to what's being said, we are also very, very active in the collaboration, including in the World Economic Forum, around standardization, because we believe standardization also drives quicker innovation in this area. So in addition to sharing information, around best practices, also standardization will help to drive this forward. Of course, then we're also deeply engaged with many of the largest industrial companies in the world, which also by definition are the most attacked, if you will, like Saudi Aramco. It's a very big partner of us. But we also partner with experts in other industries like Interpol, Europol, and the leading security technology companies in the world. And one thing we're also really, in addition to looking at the security in a bigger way, like we talked about resilience. We also see that a lot of the technologies that are being deployed now and our software for optimizing how you run equipment, so sort of OT, IT, efficiencies, if you will, we can also deploy to detect attacks, whether deliberate attacks or other types of incidents to the equipment. So there's a lot of synergies as well. But again, as I said in the beginning, we believe in collaboration, in standardization. We also have initiatives together with World Economic Forum and the Oil and Gas Initiative. And then not just for the operators or technology companies like Cognite, but also for the supply value chain, which you started with. That's really critical. And as has been mentioned by a number of people on the call, is we need to think about the whole, the whole value chain and make sure that we follow the same best practice, the same standards, and develop and share quickly together.
Thank you, John. So we're almost getting close to the end of this panel conversation, but I will be touching on the last topic related to policy. Governments play an important role in establishing a common baseline level of cybersecurity through regulations, directives, and other mechanisms such as certifications. And Dario, I will be asking you maybe to share your thoughts on the role of the private sector to ensure that policies and certification mechanisms are fit for purpose to address current and emerging systemic risks.
Yes, I think that the government have to play a very big role in terms of legislator, in terms of agency. I think that I just to go to very few points, but I think that one aspect is to extend the scope of action, and also to habilitate, to guarantee the collaboration also at the international level. Sometimes it's not so true now. And also to favor the partnership between public and private, that work more closely together also to give the possibility to make availability as far as possible resources and protective measures, response capacity, and also sources of intelligence. That is very important in terms of to prevent every let me say every risk. I think that at last there is also a part that we are already discussing with the government between let me say the private and the public relationship is how to certify different entities. I mean that how to be sure that skills, processes, technology can become more tested and safe. This is, I think, that is one aspect, because coming back to what my previous, let me say, consideration, also what have added the other participant, the other speakers, is that if the sensor, if the data, if all the information are coming from automatic sensor, that means that we have to become more safe and, let me say, and tested about this kind of device that are billion of devices that we have in our house, in our, let me say, plant and so on, that is not possible to take into consideration like not a point of failure. This is, I think that is a very big role of government that can accelerate in terms of, let me say, put together all the entities intend to collaborate, private and public. That is very, very, very important. Also to support the culture, because I think that we discussed that the culture, the posture in terms of cyber risk is the first aspect, is a very main aspect, because the human being have to, let me say, have a very strong culture. Just one pills. In my, let me say, in ENI, last week we started with, let me say, the cyber, the child cyber culture. That means that we go to the, let me say, to the children that stay in the school, start to discussing with them, intend to understanding from them what is their posture when they use the technology, intend to become to introduce some aspect that at the beginning, because in the very few years, the children become, let me say, the new adult that have to play in this very risky, let me say, world.
Thank you, Dario. We're getting close to the end of the session, so I will be asking all panelists now for a closing statement that you would like the audience to leave with. And Reem, I will be asking you to go first. One quick statement, please.
I will close with something that we have witnessed in our Kuwait oil sector, where we have established our threat intelligence sharing, and we have witnessed added value. Also on the regional level, we have also a sharing intelligence forum. We are stronger together. We have witnessed the added value of us sharing the threat intelligence as one entity, as a sector, because the same threat is being faced. So let's collaborate. I have heard collaboration between all our well-respected speakers here. We have the same objective, collaboration, to make us all secure, and when being together, we always will become more stronger. And this is my message: stronger will always make, together we'll be always more stronger.
Thank you, Reem, for this great closing message. Dario?
Yes, I think that just to finish, I think that the 2020 have introduced a lot of, let me say, challenge. I want to call just challenge, because speed up, of course, the energy transition, and also to manage the new threats, talking about, for example, the smart working, what we are doing in this time. And I think that this is have to pay a lot of attention in terms of how to use the new, let me say, technology. And once again, I think it's a matter of culture. It's a matter of culture. It's a matter to introduce it, to invest in, let me say, in training, investing on understanding really which is the opportunity in terms to use is the right way this new technology.
Thank you, Dario. Thorbjörn?
Well, I would like to build on what Dr. Reem just mentioned, collaboration and better together. So for me, connecting and connectivity is not exclusively about technology and assets, it's very much about people as well. So to connect different belief systems, different people with different skill sets, and I think that's instrumental for our future success together.
Thank you, Thorbjörn. And John, I'll leave you with the final word.
Thank you. I think, it's a fact, of course, that the digital transformation of oil and gas is critical for creating a new sustainable energy ecosystem. And it's also a fact that this digital transformation is fusing digital and the physical reality. And these have very different value chains, different dependencies, and different and a new threat landscape. And we, as has been already said, as an industry, we really need to collaborate, both in terms of spreading competence, but we also need to create a culture of sharing information and building standards that help us, move forward to make the industry both, more sustainable, but also more, resilient.
Thank you, John. I would like to extend a big thank you to the panelists, to General Clark, for a very stimulating and insightful conversation. Thank you as well to all participants. Randy, I'm handing this back to you. Thank you very much.